Okay, we're back. This is the Framingham Makerspace POV POI, and we've modified our LiPo board. The only thing we didn't do yet is, well, we did everything on that. To get ready, we're going to attach the LiPo board to the Itsy Bitsy, but what we have to do is put a piece of tape on top of that micro USB connector. So I had taken a piece of electrical tape and cut it into a little square. So I'm going to apply that, and I'm sticking at the, if you look at this, the top edge of that connector sticks up a little tiny bit. So I'm going to make sure, at least I think it does, I'm going to make sure that this tape overhangs that front edge ever so slightly, so that if there's something there, I don't want it overhanging much because I don't want it to fold down in and prevent the connector from fitting in, but I do want it to kind of overhang that edge just to make sure that if there's a little edge of the metal sticking up, it doesn't scrape the battery LiPo backpack board. So then, when we put this together, we should be like that. And as we said, we're gonna we have to be really short because we got to jam a lot of stuff in here. So we're going to cut these ahead of time so that the pins are flush with the surface of the PC board on the top and the bottom before we solder them. So I'm going to take a guess at what that is, and we'll go from there. So I'm just going to do one. So I cut one, and I'm just going to put it in here and see. So that actually looks pretty good. I can just, I don't know if you can see it on the camera, just ever so slightly sticks up. So that's probably good because I want to be able to make sure when the soldering iron, when I go to hit it, I have to be able to get the soldering iron in that pin, or we're not going to get the heat down there and it won't wick the solder down properly. So if you cut them too short and you can't get your soldering iron on the pin, you're probably going to have a problem. So it's a fine line. So I'm going to cut the rest of them, hopefully to match that one. See how good my eye is here. Okay. Do another one. Okay, so there we go. All right, looks like I got them all pretty close to the same. Let's see. Plug it in here and see what we got. And if I look at that, let's put it this way so you can see it. It looks pretty good. You can just see ever so slightly those sticking out. When I stick them in, they're ever so slightly high. So that, I think, is just right. So now I need to do that on the other side. So I have them. So we'll see how good my eye is on this side.
Are you constrained by the connector? You know, symmetrical.
Okay, I think I got that one pretty good too. You can see that bump sticking out a little bit. I might cut the other two a tiny bit shorter, like ever so slightly a bit shorter. Just because I don't want them, like I said, I've got this, and I could redesign the plastic a little bit, but everything at this point is basically kind of friction fit in. The processor board and the backpack board are kind of friction fit. That looks a little bit long. So, it might be a short, but we'll see. Okay, so the place where you want to put it on here is, if you look at this board and position it this way with the USB up at the top, it says BAT, G, and USB. And then if you look at the, slide that over. If you look at the little battery, the backpack board, same thing, BAT, G, and 5 volts. So the USB is actually the 5 volt power coming in the USB, and so that lines up with this 5 volt 5V pin over here. So we're gonna put this so that the header is on the same side of the board as the processor chip and the micro USB connector on the Itsy Bitsy. Okay, you don't want it going down on the bottom, so the bottom is flat. There's no components or anything on the bottom of this board, and that's good. And then this one, you want to put this on again with the connector pins lining up, and you'll see that the battery connector would have been on the top. Again, all the components are on the top facing upwards. There's no components on the bottom of that board. So all the components on both boards are facing upwards. So now I'm going to want to try to solder this, and I want to keep these boards together and make sure there's no space. You know, now you can rotate these. Let me show you this. So you can rotate these a little bit like this, because there's some slop in the holes for the pins. So when you solder it, you want to make sure when you're done it's not rotated like that, because again, it's all friction fit. So if it's sticking out like that, it'll be a problem. So you want to make sure that it's, you know, kind of flush or a little bit inbound from the edge of the itsy bitsy with the board. You don't want it rotated, and you don't want it sticking out. So a couple extra things to think about when you're doing this. So I'm going to try to use my 3 hands. We'll see if Brian has to come in and assist. I'm hoping not, but I'd like to have folks be able to do it. So, whoops. Okay, I'm going to put this all back together again. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of solder on my soldering iron. It's not sticking too well. Try that again. There we go, we got a little bit on there. Okay, so I'm going to put a little bit of solder on my soldering iron so it'll wet nicely. You let go, Brian? I'm just going to try to hold that down. And there you go. You could see that flowed in nicely. I could see the thing. Now you can see that I've got my board rotated a little bit like that, which is not what I want to do. But at this point I'm only soldering the top pins, so I can still rotate it. It's when I do the last ones that I have to get that right. So I'm going to clean my tip again here. Get a little more solder on there. Yeah, it doesn't want to. There. Whoops. There we go. Okay. Get a little more flux on there. So I'm just going to heat this up. Yeah, I don't want to put too much solder in here either. And then you want to just make sure it flows. There we go. You can see it flow right in there. So you want to make sure it just flows right in. And again, it's important to make sure that you get your soldering iron touching the pin, because that's the thing that's going to take a lot of heat to get going. And then it flows right in. Put a little bit more on that guy. And again, I want to make sure I don't have, you know, solder blobs sticking up on the top. So if I take this and we look at this kind of, whoops, edge on here, you can see on the top I really don't have anything sticking up on top of the board there. So that looks really nice. So now we're going to do the other 3. So with this one, I'm going to flip everything upside down. And it's a little harder because that's an uneven surface. I'm looking for something to... I should have done the other one first. But be that as it may. Okay, so I'm going to do one of these pins on the end, and that'll make it so if I have to rotate it, I can just heat that one pin up and rotate it before I get the other ones tied down. So again, I'm just going to put a little bit of solder on my iron. Whoops. Make sure I touch the pin. Okay, I saw it wick in there. And I'm going to check. And you can see that looks terrible. But I only have one pin done so far, so I'm going to reheat that. Ouch. And if you touch the pin on the top, you'll feel it. Yeah, it's getting warm. Try to keep this in the camera field of view. This is where fingernails help. I don't feel the heat as quickly. Okay, so that's, if I look at the top here, it looks relatively square, so I think I'm okay there. So I have the one on the bottom, and again, if you look at it this way, you can see that there's really nothing protruding from the bottom there, so that's good. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other two. See if I can keep it in the camera field of view while I do this so you can watch me. Oops. Okay, that sucked right down in there. So this side I cut a tiny bit shorter so they don't actually stick up that little bit. They're just below the surface of the board. So you got to really get down in there and heat that. Didn't really get it. Make sure your soldering iron tip gets on the pin. I just want to, that joint doesn't look great. I'm going to try that again. That's the ground. That might be why. It's probably got a big piece of copper in the board. So it's, I got that extra. I'm going to clean that extra solder off. You want to make sure you don't short the pins by putting too much solder on. So I think why I'm having trouble here is this is probably going to a ground plane. This may be a 4-layer board or something. Yeah, I can feel the heat all the way over here. So the PC board has got a lot of copper that's dissipating that heat. Okay, that doesn't look great, but I think that's got it. That's going to be good enough. Okay, now, see, I've got a problem here where this is kind of angled upwards. So I want to try to fix that. So I'm going to try to, this will be interesting to see if I can do this. I got to kind of reheat that. I don't really want it to be like that. So I'm going to try to reheat that battery pin and see if I can pull it up a little bit. Might not be able to, but I'll try. So I'm just going to push down. I'm kind of aimed down there, and I'm just going to try to heat this. It's probably not going to do anything because the ground is really, yeah, it didn't do too much. And I want to be careful not to push too hard because I don't want to damage any components on the board. Alright, well, I'm going to just try this and see if it fits in my plastic piece here. So, I don't know if you can see this. Let me move my camera up a little bit. Myself a little bigger field of view. Hopefully that'll refocus. Okay, so I've got this guy. It slides in, and it gets to be a tight fit near the back here. So when you go to take it out, you have to put something back in there, like a back end of a pliers, and push it out so you don't damage the board. But I just want to make sure that this is going to fit in, and it looks like it will. It's going in tight, but it's fitting in, and it doesn't look like I'm, damaging the board or anything. Like the backpack board is not too far over. Worst comes to worst, I can take a razor knife and scrape the plastic at the top there where this is sticking up a little bit in the front. Just scrape a little plastic off so that it gives it clearance there. But it went in that far, so I think, again, worst case, I scrape a little plastic and that'll fit. So I'm just going to stick this down in the hole here and push from the back, and it takes a bit to get it out. Of course, it helps if you don't jam that in. So there we go. We now have our Itsy Bitsy and our LiPo backpack ready to go. Thank you.